Cyberpunk, The Flame That Remains. Written and read by Ethan Taplin. Chapter 19. Mother. Night City, 2075. The corridor felt colder after Einar's footsteps faded. Sophie stood for a moment longer, the weight of his words pressing against her ribs like an old injury. Then she drew a breath, forcing it down, and turned to the doors behind her. They loomed at the end of the hall, identical to 100 others she'd passed aboard the Naglfar. Ares stepped up beside her, one hand resting at her back in that quiet, grounding way of his. Liv and Astrid flanked them without a word, weapons low but ready. Mael lingered a half step behind them, one arm still wrapped tight around his ribs. "On your lead," Ares murmured. Sophie sighed. "Maybe we'll get out of this without another fight," she said, taking a look at her wounded siblings and touching her bruised cheek. She pressed Einar's keycard to the reader set into the face of the right-hand door and braced herself for who, or what, was waiting for them on the other side. "You won't find what you're looking for in there." Einar's words rattled in her head. What could he have meant? The thought was still gnawing at her when the door locks disengaged and they began to slide open. The office beyond was dim, lit only by the spill of light from the hallway. The air smelled faintly of ozone, and something else that Sophie couldn't quite place. At the far end, behind a wide, black desk, a figure sat in shadow, posture relaxed, hands folded in her lap. "Ursa," Sophie said. The name left her mouth like a curse. For 19 years before she fled Naustrand, this woman, this shadow, had been the center of Sophie's world. Not a mother, not truly, but the architect of every wound carved into her body and mind. The one who had wired her nervous system into weapons-grade tech before she was old enough to understand what she'd lost. The one who had sent her on missions with targets older than she was, and enemies twice her size, and called it training. Her own scars didn't matter, not compared to the thought of what Ursa had done, or might still be doing, to the others. Freya's descent into cyberpsychosis, Rune and Eric's deaths, maybe Sigrid's too. The constant danger hanging over Mael, Astrid, Liv. All because Sophie had run, and Ursa had refused to let her go. Ursa could turn the whole of Night City into a battlefield if it meant pulling her children back into the fold. And Sophie knew she would, without hesitation. Her hands curled into fists. "Do you even know what you've done to them?" she asked, her voice low and jagged. "What you've taken from them? You used us like tools, put us through torture. You made sure none of us could ever have a life without you in it. You call yourself our mother, but we're no more than pets to you." Sophie's companions were silent. Whether it was because they had no words, or trusted hers would be enough, she wasn't sure. A faint chuckle drifted from the figure in the shadows. "I know exactly what I've done." Ursa's voice was measured, almost indulgent. "I shaped you, all of you. Everything you've become, everything you've survived. You survived because of me." Sophie's jaw clenched. "We survived in spite of you." "That's the same thing," Ursa replied, a trace of amusement threading through the calm. "You call it torture. I call it preparation. Unlike your brothers and sisters, you came from me. Without me, you would have been nothing. Nothing would have been better than what you've made me." "You don't believe that," Ursa said. "Every step you've taken, every victory you've clawed out of the dirt, every sibling you've tried to protect, you only had the strength to do it because of me." "You don't get to take credit for that," Sophie snapped. "You didn't give me strength. You just kept taking until there was nothing left but something you could use." On the contrary, Sophie could hear the smile creeping into Ursa's voice. I built you up bit by bit until you were exactly like me. The words hit Sophie like the frigid air of the Norse Alps. Sophie felt something tighten in her chest, the sort of fury that leaves no room for thought. You think that's something to be proud of? She screamed, stepping closer. All you ever taught me was how to hate you. Ursa's laugh was quiet, almost fond. And yet here you are, standing before me, doing exactly what I would do. Tell me again how we're so different. That was it. The last stone placed in a heap of 24 years' worth of pain. Sophie's vision narrowed to the silhouette in the chair, her pulse roaring in her ears. In 2 strides she was at the desk, her hands wrapped around the left edge, and in a show of strength she didn't know she could muster, the desk went tumbling across the room. She seized Ursa by the collar and yanked hard, pulling her up from the chair and close to her face. The overhead lights blazed to life. The face she held wasn't sneering or smirking. It was slack, lifeless. Ursa Hrafn's daughter, older and lined with years, her mother, stared past her with empty eyes. A neat bullet hole marked the center of her forehead. Sophie's grip faltered, the weight in her hands suddenly alien. Gasps rang out behind her. Ares and her siblings saw what she did, and something she didn't. A shadow shifted behind the corpse. Someone stood behind the chair, undoubtedly the voice with whom Sophie had been speaking. Someone her height, her age, with her face, sharpened into something colder and crueler. Platinum hair cut like a blade, eyes like hers, but stripped of hesitation. Sophie was looking into the face of Ursa, younger and rejuvenated. But more than that, she was looking into her own face as well. Took you long enough, the other Sophie smiled. Sophie's fingers slackened, and the body slid from her grasp. It crumpled back into the chair before listing sideways and spilling to the floor with a dull, final thud. She stumbled backwards, feeling once more that the room was full of freezing air. The other Sophie reached forward and pushed the chair away with one smooth motion. She stepped over Ursa's body and stood where the desk had been. She was wearing a sleek black suit. Her hair was straight and cut into a clean corporate bob, and her face was twisted with cruelty. Despite these differences, Sophie was certain now. They were sisters, or something similar. You were expecting the old woman, her reflection said, her voice low and rich with the same cadence that haunted Sophie's nightmares. She glanced down at the corpse with mock pity. I'm afraid she's unavailable. The words landed in the silence like a stone dropped into deep water. Sophie's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She just stared, her own features staring back at her, twisted with an alien self-assurance. It was Mael who finally found his voice. Who the hell are you? The reflection's smile widened. Isn't it obvious? I'm your mother. Sophie's heart dropped into the pit of her stomach. She felt sick. I am Ursa Hrafn's daughter, CEO of Ymir Skandatek, the Queen of Naustrand. Same mind, same blood, every memory she had. She gestured to the body at her feet. She was old, slowing down, out of step with her own vision. I'm the younger, sharper, upgraded version. It was obvious who should carry the name, the title, the perks. She laughed, covering her mouth with the back of her hand. Tell me, if there's only one at a time, how could I be anyone else? Her gaze returned to Sophie, eyes narrowing as she continued. Oh, but there's not just one, is there? Sophie's knees turned to jelly, the floor seeming to tilt beneath her. Ares was there instantly, a steadying hand at her arm, the heat of him the only thing keeping her upright. You're a clone, Sophie mumbled. Her mind was flooding. The deluge of images and memories threatened to throw her to the ground. She barely felt Ares' hands under her arms as the images came faster and faster. She recalled Ursa's face, how she'd looked 15 and 20 years ago. How could she never have noticed when she'd grown to look exactly the same? Had Ursa's features changed enough to hide it? How had she looked into her mother's eyes in the mirror every day and never noticed? No, not her mother. Ursa was mother in title only. She thought back to what she had seen hidden in the fragmented, scattered shell of Intellect Mask 13, the seeking tendril Prosopon had sent out to find her. The memory was as clear now as it had been then, recreated for her to relive through cyberspace. She had lain on her back, unable to lift her arms. The muscles had been brand new, unused. Her whole body had ached, as though it had never before been subjected to gravity, only buoyant force. Her skin itched, as though it had never been exposed to air, which of course it never had. Her breathing had even been unfamiliar. Ursa's face had loomed into view, tears in her eyes. The digital recreation had blurred the sight of the eyes that had never seen before, but now she knew for certain it had been Ursa. Her platinum hair was the same as Sophie's. Even the way they wore it was nearly identical. The new Ursa was the exception. She had been named next, first by the machine, Subject 13, Muspelheim, then by her mother. Sophie, she had said, you will be my greatest creation. Creation. Sophie had known, back in her apartment submerged in ice, that what she was being shown were true events. She'd lived them all. Deep down, she knew that that held true to this as well, though this memory was not one she had created herself. But something was still wrong. The twins, Alfheim and Vanaheim, Astrid and Liv, they had been there. They had seen it. Then why hadn't they told her? Had they lied intentionally? Did they even know this much? They were young, 3 or 4 years old at most then. Why were they there? Liv, Sophie supposed, had been brought as part of her learning. If she was to be a doctor within Naustrand, she would have had to start young. Astrid was there because the twins were inseparable, she supposed. But why didn't they tell me? It didn't matter now. She would find out when it was over. Her throat was tight, but the words broke free anyway. You're me, Sophie said softly, then corrected herself. No, I'm Ursa, the same as you, a clone. Ursa's smirk deepened, pleased at Sophie's trembling voice. Correct. You and I, 2 of us. No more. She paced slowly, like a teacher circling her classroom. You were meant to be my daughter, Sophie. I wanted to raise you, shape you. You would have been my perfect heir. A life I could watch unfold from infancy, molded by my hand alone. So you turned me into a weapon, Sophie spat as she finally regained her footing. Sent me to the corpse shore to learn how to kill. To have your pet machine watch over and record my every move. She felt her hands clench into fists, her fingernails digging into her palms hard enough to draw blood, had she had any in her synthetic limbs. Or did you do it so that I could have siblings, and one day you could make my sister cut me to pieces and put me back together? Ursa shook her head slowly, almost pitying. Almost. No, the Neheimar was never meant for you. Yours was supposed to be a different path. She circled the overturned desk, tracing a finger along the edge as she continued, her voice low, with an instructive cadence. The program was mine, yes, but you were to remain outside. The Neheimar were designed to be a weapon, a hidden cadre that would never know any but their own. Siblings bond by trial and blood, not children. Her eyes glittered as she stopped and studied Sophie. You were the exception. You were to be raised apart. My heir, my daughter. But then, Muspelheim failed. 4 attempts, 4 dead, each one rejecting the conditioning, each one burned out by their implants. The program needed a netrunner, but none of them could survive it. She lifted the desk back onto its feet and sat casually on the edge, as if lecturing in a classroom. I knew someone who could. I had already done it, or rather, she had. Ursa gestured lazily toward the corpse on the floor. Back in the 20s, during the Fourth Corporate War, on June 3rd, 2022, the old net burned in the data crash. Bartmoss died, the rabids virus spread like wildfire, and the net collapsed around anyone still inside. Her tone sharpened, pride lacing her words. Ursa was one of them. A corporate soldier, jacked in while the net itself was dying. Systems failing, defenses collapsing, black ice going feral. And she endured it. She lived while others melted down or never came back. She survived with her mind intact, carrying implants that should have left her a corpse. She proved that she could survive anything. Ursa's eyes cut back to Sophie, cold and certain. That's why you were chosen. Because unlike any other candidate, you were her. And if she could survive the data crash and the rabids, then you could survive this. Sophie shook her head, her voice breaking into a bitter laugh. So that's it! Ursa chose to throw her own child into the fire because she could have done it? Because in her mind I'm not even a person? I was just her again? Her hands, still balled into fists, trembled as she fought the urge to lunge at Ursa a second time. She needed answers first. Ursa's smirk returned, cold and unflinching. Exactly. You weren't meant to be a weapon, but you adapted, better than any of them. You carried what none of them could, and in doing so, you bound them to you. Without you, Sophie, the Neheimar would never have been a family. They became my children only because you were among them. Her gaze cut to the others, Liv, Astrid, Mael, before snapping back to Sophie. You gave them purpose. You gave them reason. And you did it because you are me. The proof that my design was flawless. Sophie's laugh died in her throat, replaced by something raw. Flawless! You think this was flawless? Liv's voice cracked sharply, almost a snarl. I was 14 when you made me cut her open. 14! Carving my own sister apart because you wanted to see if she... No, because you wanted to see if you could survive it! Astrid's golden eyes flickered, distant, haunted. And I hear it always, the voice that never stops. No surprises, no peace. Every moment stolen by your machine in my skull. Mael spat blood into his hand, his voice bitter. You talk about family, but when Sophie fled, I was lost. You chained me to that place, and it wasn't until we found her again, and I saw Eric grinning as he ripped out her chrome, that I realized we were broken. I'm ashamed to say that I couldn't break my yoke any sooner. Sophie's nails dug deeper into her palms. Eric killed Katya, Subject 9. He was going to kill me, too. He nearly did, twice. And I was only saved by my siblings. Freya lost her mind the second she realized we were no longer under her command. Rune and Sigrid, perfect soldiers, never questioned a thing. And me. Her voice cracked, fury and grief twisting together. I was 11 when Liv cut me apart. 11 when you grafted a Sandevistan to my spine and left me trapped to fend for myself in what I can only imagine was a perfect reflection of hell. I couldn't tell you how long it took for those days to pass, but it was long enough to drive anyone mad. Anyone but you, I suppose. Suppose that's the only thing I'll ever thank you for. If I had been anyone else, I think that experience alone would have driven me insane. She bared her teeth, trembling with the force of it. Flawless? The Nihaimar were anything but. The only reason Ursa would come herself, aboard the Naglfar no less, is because she recognized this, and decided it was time to end the experiment. But you, Sophie glared right into the other clone's eyes. You might be as close to being her as it's possible to be, but you couldn't see it. You thought that you were still in control, and you could bring us back. Ursa's eyes widened. Her smirk vanished. What do you... Sophie's voice rose, ragged but unyielding. You want to claim perfection? Then look at us. Look at what your design left behind. We weren't children. We weren't soldiers. We were experiments that bled too much to be counted as successes. You call that flawless? She took a step closer, Ares' hand still firm on her shoulder, but her words cutting free like blades. The first Ursa saw it. She saw how broken we were. That's why she came here herself. Not to reclaim us, not to welcome us home. She came to erase her mistakes, to kill us all, even the ones still loyal, so she would never again have to look at what she'd done. Sophie's chest heaved, her nails biting into her palms until she felt her synthetic skin tear. Her gaze locked on the other clone, unblinking. You say you're her, that you've inherited every memory, every instinct. Then inherit that truth too. Ursa made monsters of her own children, and when she couldn't hide it from herself anymore, she decided to burn it all down. That's the place you've stepped into. Ursa tilted her head. Her smirk returned, curling her lips. Spare me the outrage. You are me, Sophie. Every scar you wear, every death you carry, that's proof of my design. You can scream, you can rage, but in the end, you'll only ever be my greatest success. The words hit Sophie like a hammer blow, but Ares was there to steady her. No, you're wrong. His voice carried no anger, only conviction. I've seen her bleed, I've seen her break, and I've seen her keep going when anyone else would have given up. That's not you. You don't care about anyone but yourself. She cares, more than anyone I've ever met, enough to carry the weight you buried her under. That's the difference. Sophie isn't you, and she sure as hell isn't your success. Sophie's success is all her own. Sophie's breath came fast, her chest tight, but her voice cut sharp, Ares' words giving her strength. You think this is about me hating you? About personal revenge? She shook her head, bitter laughter scraping her throat. I do hate you, Ursa, but no. This is about making sure no one else ever suffers what we have. No more children torn apart to prove your theories. No more brothers or sisters broken because you wanted to see what would last. Her eyes narrowed, burning. I'm going to stop you. For Liv, for Astrid, for Mael, for Freya, Rune, and Sigrid, for Einar, and even for Eric. She reached up to her shoulder, placing her hand on Ares and squeezed. For every Muspelheim who came before. For Katya, who you allowed Eric to slaughter. For Marin and Lena, burned out by their implants. And for Hannah, who took her own life with a fucking spoon! I'll carry them all into this fight, and I will end you. So there are no more victims added to the count. She squeezed Ares' hand against her shoulder with trembling fingers, her other hand shaking at her side, but her voice held steady. You call yourself our mother. Fine. Then understand this. It all ends here, with me avenging your children.